Hello everybody, I'm pleased to say that my detailed mods was a popular video, or popular-ish. It only had a few things, but it's got to have more likes than most, so obviously people like it, so here we are. I'm now going to tell you some secrets about modding any game, even games without tools. Now, most games have data files. These data files themselves are typically archives. They can be, sometimes if you see a main game .dat file and you change it to main game .zip and you will try and open it in WinZip, it will open and you'll be able to extract the contents because it is literally just a zip file. Sometimes, some games, it's literally that easy. You've got to test it and find out. That means you've got to understand how to change the extensions on a file just so you can experiment, because that's the quickest way of finding out what works and what doesn't. Because anything you've got in your system, installed in your system, will try and open it when you change the extension to match. And if it works, then you've found out what that game file is and you can start modding that game. Now, that's how I do it. Sometimes though, you've got to have like a hex editor. And what you do is you open up the file in the hex editor, you look at the header, that means you look at the first few lines of code, and you see if you can see any telltale sign in there, if it's a certain compression used like BZ something or other. Right? If it is, then you go and find a BZ decompressor, and then you do the renaming of the extension, try to open the file. They use these tricks to try and access this inside this .dat file. Once you've got it open, you've got it extracted, you see other files in there. Sometimes these are compressed again, right? And you try to load what looks like a text file into a text editor, you just get garbage. That's either compressed or it's not a text file. But if it is a text file and it is compressed, you need to decompress that as well. Sometimes it's the same compression method used, sometimes it's not. It's added security. But once you've figured it all out and you've decompressed it, you can rewrite that script and then recompress it. Sometimes you don't even need to recompress it, it'll read it straight without needing to be recompressed. And you'll be able to then just make modifications to the game at will. Typically, graphics are BMP or TNG, depending on the thing. Sometimes it might be PNG these days, because that's been fairly popular, in the last 20 years. But yeah, there's lots and lots of different things, but they very rarely use JPEG in my experience, because JPEG isn't a lossless system. It takes away detail, and most gaming companies don't want the file compression to be taken away by JPEG. They'd rather choose themselves specifically than have it done when you just compress a file, because you get unpredictable results sometimes when you allow JPEG to do it. So anyhow, yeah, getting access to everything first, that's the key thing, and that involves a bit of messing about. You could take Windows, for instance, and you could rename a file from, say, myfile.txt to myfile.silly. Windows would then say, this is a silly file. This is some of the fun you can have with these tricks without modding any game. You could just take the mick by renaming someone's extensions, and you could literally leave a message down their detailed file list of, this is a very silly file. Simply by making the first one .this, .is, .a, silly .file. And it'll literally, Windows will say, this is a very silly file. Yeah, it's the same thing. When you're modding, you're doing that anyway. You're just trying to find the decompression. So anyhow, if you have a lot of different compressors on your system, WinZip, BZZip, 7-zip, that kind of thing, or RAR, that helps. That does help, right? So that's one of the ways. Once you've got past all that, and you want to learn to program, your best bet is to find a script or a program you already know works, get the source code for it and work on that. You don't have to improve it, you just have to make a change, have it compile and see it working to learn. And if you're learning, even by making the program worse, then you're getting better. And that's how it works. That's how you learn to program other games, by editing and checking the results. And you go back and you keep doing it and doing it and doing it until you start seeing something you like, and then you release it as a mod. So yeah, on the subject of mods and skill sets, the rarest is scripters, In my experience, you get very few scripters. So if you can program, you're probably in the top 10% of modders, you know, when it comes to being useful. The second after that is texture artists. I know 3D modelers like to think, you know, that they're rare. They're not. They're 10 to the dozen. It's the texture artists. If you're making a mod team, texture artists are the people you need to be finding, because there'll be loads of textures to do if you're doing a 3D, you know, a mod with 3D models in it. And everybody wants to make the 3D models, but not many people want to map on the textures and stuff like that. And even the 3D artists don't. So you end up with thousands of models that aren't textured. If you want to make sure your mod will get finished, you need to know how to script, you need to know how to make 3D models, you need to know how to texture. I know all of this, right? You don't need to be brilliant at it, you just need to know how to do it. Because if someone sees you can actually produce a mod, even if it looks a bit crap, they might volunteer to help and take over one of the jobs that you're not very good at, and they might be better at you. Right? But if you can do it yourself, you can get that job out the door, you can get that project finished, and then when people come up to help, they will improve on your work, which is how teams are formed. That's how teams are born naturally. If your first thought is to go into a group and go, I'm making a mod, who wants to join my team? You're doomed. You're doomed to fail straight away, right? A, you've not proven you can do anything. B, nobody's going to take you seriously. And C, anybody that joins probably won't be very good at anything anyway and might not even make any effort. In fact, I'll change that might not make any effort to will not make any effort. Because quite frankly, most groups born that way are born out of time wasting. And if you're posting on a group before you've got anything to show, you are time wasting, and you're going to attract time wasters. You need to have something to show people. Now, I'll tell you a story here, right? Back in the MechWarrior 4 days, I formed a group called MechStorm, opened up a website called MechStorm, and we basically had fun modding that game. But before that, I was on a website called MechWarrior 4 Online. This was just a fan-based one. There's nothing online about MechWarrior at the time except for the multiplayer aspects. And I started typing, right, based on what I've told you in this video about file extensions and what I was doing, what I looked at in the game. I started telling people that I think this game is made this way, the texture maps are this type, things of that type. The game seems to be made this way. And one of the devs, I can't remember his name now, you know, basically invited me to join their beta team. There was lots of people wanting to be involved, right? So I said, look, do you mind if I form a team to help test this? And they said, no. So I did. I formed MechStorm, and we tested their editor. And by the time the editor went live, we found out that we were actually the ones making the most use out of it. The rest of the MechWarrior community basically thought, yeah, we're beta testers out, we were important, but hadn't done anything with it. We made actual maps with it. We learned how to use it. We became leaders in the field of modding MechWarrior because of that. And all because we got invited in, and we got invited in because I'd used the tricks I've taught you in this video to find out what the compression was, the extensions and stuff like that, and then just made guesses. Educated guesses based on what I knew. And I'm very rarely wrong, and I nailed that one. So that's how you mod a game, that's how it works, from compression all the way through to editing. And these little tricks when you edit just a little thing, that's how you start coding, that's how you start learning to script. I don't really like the word coding, I call it programming because I'm old school. Modern people call it coding. But basically, you know, when you learn to program. I never really bothered with C++. Well, I don't know, C.NET or whatever they're calling it these days because they keep changing it. Because that's usually Microsoft specific. C, you know, is you can learn that it'll work on anything. You learn Microsoft's own version, it'll only work on Windows. So, yeah. I never really bothered with that because I'm not really a utility maker. It's not something that's interested me. So I've never really bothered with that. Although I can read C, you know, because it's like every other language. Instead, I focused on routines, AIs, things like that. And there are certain things you pick up along the way that's common to everything. One of them is the main game loop, the counter, the loop counter. It's as simple as, usually in most languages, it's written as say, any character equals any character usually the same character, plus 1. So let's say, for example, it's a V, it'd be V equals V plus 1. So it goes, every time the game goes round in a loop, plus 1, plus 1, plus 1, plus 1, plus 1. So what are the effects is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And at 5 you have a branch. If V equals 5, now you put equal equals 5, because this is how you write it. Usually 2 equals. Once you know this is something else that helps you learn other languages. Plus plus equals minus minus. In computer terms, I believe if you do plus plus, it's actually a negative, and minus minus is actually a positive. I think, I can't remember, it's been a long time since I've done that bit, but anyway, you do equals something, or sometimes it's just equals. And so you put V equals 5 or equals 5, that means it equals exactly 5, right? And then you actually get to the count when it comes around. 5 executes that branch there. 6 executes a branch over here. 7 executes a branch down here. So suddenly you've gone from simply counting the loop to executing parts of a script based on whatever the number is. And it only does it once. If you want to trigger it twice, you've got to reset V to 0 again. So you get to 10. If V equals 10, then V equals 1, and it starts again. So we're just going to count it up to 10, then reset it to 0 once it hit 10, so we can run everything again. So now you've got your own little game going on with multiple functions kicking in. Now that's a standard trick, right? It's a common trick, but it is a very useful one. You've got like you've got a kind of like what's the word for it? Object-oriented code, they used to call it. I don't know what they call it. I've been out of touch for 5 years, but object-oriented code is functions basically. I like functions because they're little mini programs. It'll say function Bob brackets your code end function at the bottom. You copy and paste that, bang 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 bang, and you've got several versions of it. You can edit it slightly to make it different, and then in your other main loop here you say, you know, you just name the function usually. Like if it's function Bob, you put Bob brackets, and it'll call function Bob brackets, right? Brackets like that, right? So then it'll call that function and do whatever that code is. That function there could be your counter. It could be function Bob brackets V equals V plus 1 end function. Then you call Bob. Then it goes 1. Call Bob again. 2. Call Bob again. 3. Call Bob again. 4. That's basically object-oriented code. They take these things out of the main game loop and call these functions in. The advantage being, these functions could be called at any time. You don't need to keep rewriting the whole code all the time like you would if it was a linear system where it goes on in a game loop. You can just say, right, Bob, come here, we need you. Okay, go away, Bob, we don't need you now. We need you again, Bob, come here. Object-oriented code right there. I like using for Skyrim, for instance. Well, if we look at Oblivion, Oblivion was more of a linear loop. Right? It goes around in a loop 1, 2, 3, 4. Skyrim and Fallout 4 isn't. They both use object-oriented code methods where they bring in a function. And it's a very different approach to programming, but they've both got their own uses. Oblivion system is much easier, right? But object-oriented code is a lot harder to initially learn, but once you've learned it, it gives you a world of options which you'll see for yourself, right? I mean, for instance, right, I could have a squad of men pop up and attack you for one function, right? I could just say, if it's a nice day, spawn order 4 swans, attack the player. And off they go. If it's not a nice day, the 4 swans stay at home because they don't like the rain. Say the player going, isn't it a bad day today, so be out walking, bye player, and then it walks off, whatever. Right? It's simple. It's really, really simple. Once you understand the common structures and concepts behind programming, you'll see it everywhere. You'll see it everywhere. You'll understand what you're looking at. Even though you've never used that language before, you will understand what you're looking at and you'll be able to interpret it. And that's very useful when you're modding lots of different games. because every game uses a different system, and if you can read every system, even without you never seeing it before, if you've never seen it before in your life, you can still read it. All you've got to do is learn the syntax. And now the best syntax to learn first is the ones that are used for adding up and doing mathematical equations. Like, I can't remember what they call it now, punctuation mark equals, right, or slash equals and stuff like that, and plus plus and plus minus and whatever. Learn all that first, right, because you're going to need that. Mathematics is part of programming. You can't get away from it. I would say if you're no good at maths, you're probably not going to be very good at programming. On the other hand, right, if you've got really good logical thinking process, you might be able to make up for it with that. Logic, being able to be logical about things, that's good. Being able to make things simple, strip it down and make it simple, that's good. Making big complicated scripts, that's bad. Complicated scripts are hard to bug fix, lead to lots of errors. You might make good games, but you'll be buggy games, right? So you keep the code simple. It might run a little bit slower as a result in some cases. But here's another thing, right? In assembly language, right, the code is basically much bigger than in a compiled language, a high level language. So you'd think it runs slower, but it actually runs faster because the commands are simple. It just shoots down the list really quick. Where with the high level language, it's got to interpret every single line one at a time, and it slows it down. So it might be a shorter program, but it's a slower program. C++ and all are all interpreted, you know, they're compiled. And basic, well actually, it's compiled, C++. Basic and all, you know, that's linear, but it's interpreted. There's lots of different things anyway. You've got the compiled languages, you've got the languages that are basically written in machine code, 10100011. Assembly, which is one step away from 10101111. And then you've got text like, you know, like C++, which is put through a compiler to turn it into 10101111. You know, and without that though, it stays in English. You see, the whole point is a high level language is you can read it. Whereas if you ever try programming in a binary or assembly, and I have, right, it says you'll find you don't know where you are half the time because you can't understand what ESM means and stuff like that. So you think, well, what's that? What's that exactly? Because it breaks it down. Like if you want to like write a program in assembly, you have to say tense eyelid, right? Slowly close eyelid, slowly open eyelid. That's a wink. You know, it's a really long system, whereas a high level language might have a built-in code that says just wink. You go like that, you know, jobs are good. And so it's different. It is different. It makes a change, makes a difference on the level language. The low level languages are much harder to work with. High level languages are much easier to work with, and most things are text based, so they're a high level language, right? So they're easier to read and understand. Anyway, we're going to leave it there because it's eight minutes and I've been all over the place on this video. If you like any particular part of it, tell me, because there's massive topics here. Absolutely huge. We're talking King Kong's... No, I'm not going to say that on there, but you know what I'm talking about. Massive topics here. If I were you, if you want some homework for this, learn object-oriented code, just the structure of it, how it's supposed to work, how an empty function, that's it, an empty function. Find a language that has functions, one you want to use, learn how to write an empty function. That's a function that just has a function name, brackets, end function with nothing in between. Learn how to get that called from another program. It should just be the name of the function brackets, and that should be it. Learn about that, and then you can stick anything you want inside the function and it'll be called in the program, and you would have made a major improvement in your programming right there simply by learning that little bit there. Because you can just keep editing that function, trying out different techniques. It'll give you something to use as a test bed. And a lot of the things you do when you're modding is testing. You're not just testing to see if your code works, you're testing what the programs can do, what games can do. where the limit lies. Like for instance, I can tell you once you get to a certain point in Skyrim, not Skyrim SE, normal Skyrim, the characters just stand there like that and they look around. The rival animations work, but the AIs are switched off because there's too many on the screen at the same time. So I know that Skyrim handles too many characters on screen by having the excess ones stand around and ignores them. And that's, you only learn that by doing this testing that I'm talking about. So yeah. Anyway, let us know what you like and subscribe. I know a lot on this topic, right? I could tell you tips on how to mod all kinds of games from Dawn of War, Freelancer, Mech Warrior, you name it, I've done it. Not just Skyrim, not just Oblivion games, I've done loads of modding. I've made Arex programs for CNET, the BBS software. I've written entire databases, not just filled in blanks on somebody else's database. I mean, I created the database program. And I did that back in Basic, not Visual Basic, just normal Basic, line by line. I've done all of this, right, simply because I dived in and tried to do it. So there isn't much I can't help you with, but remember, right, it's up to you to do the hard work. I'm only going to give you pointers because there's no way of avoiding the hard work. If you're not willing to do the hard work, then you're not going to get anywhere. You might as well give up. I will say this though, when you're first trying to get access to the game code and you want to find out where the raw material is, you know, the JPEGs and the model files, so you can edit them, the meshes, right? And you're trying to find that compiler, or not compiler, that file that will decompress it. Sometimes somebody comes along and they make that file for you, and then suddenly, bang, the whole community explodes. Until that point, you're on your own. And the quickest way of actually making a community and at the same time, and this is why my sites were successful, if I tell you the truth, make a community at the same time building up a database, is to record what you learn and stick it online for others to read. That has a snowball effect. Other people that come after you think, I'll read that. Oh, that's how you do it. And they might be better than you at it and might be able to take that information further and then bring back their findings to you. Now, I always found, right, that I was always the one that did the discovering, shared with other people, then I got to enjoy their work. Sometimes people will take what you taught them and then just sod off and, you know, not teach you anything that they learn. You know, that happens. You can't get mad at people like that because, quite frankly, they're just selfish twats. But in a lot of cases, people will come back with more information. It's important you write it down. This is how you build modding communities. That's how you start with a website that has no visitors and run it up to millions. It's how I've done it 3 times. Right? So yeah, that is a secret, and that's how you build a modding community out of nowhere. Now, if you're interested in being an important member of a community, how more important can you be than being the person that established the community? And it starts from there. But don't forget, right, sometimes these tool makers want to be part of it, and sometimes they're arseholes about it and they really run other people down and cause trouble like they do in the Bethesda community. Sometimes they'll just release a tool and then disappear. They won't maintain it or anything, they'll just release your basic tool and all you'll have is a command line interface program that you run from a DOS prompt, which means you have to learn how to use DOS or shell. If you do it on Linux, right, then you feel free to laugh at DOS users, right? I do. I use Amiga shell, I've used Bash, I've used all kinds of stuff. PC users have the worst of all shells. Can we even call it a shell? Yeah, seriously. Anyhow, this is getting into the politics of modding and programming now, because this is like dragging up. Things are going back, for me, going back to the mid-80s or early 80s. I mean, this is ancient history that's never really changed. So yeah, anyway, this is a long video, so I'm going to get off now. But if you watch to the end and you find this interesting, like and subscribe and tell me you like this video. Tell me you want to hear more so I know, because there's so much more to this. I mean, I haven't even covered about NIF files, mesh editing, texturing, remaps, bump mapping, any of that nonsense either. And I haven't told you about AIs and stuff like that. I mean, Radiant AI Skyrim, I mean, I wrote my own. long before you know, Bethesda even came up with the Radiant AI. But to be honest, the name is usually a gimmick. You know, it is a gimmick. It's not really something they've just created. They've just made a few small improvements to the old code. But anyway, yeah, let me know. If you don't, you'll never hear it. All right, see you in the next one.